Welcome to Recap World. Today we are discussing a movie in which the G.I. Joes are not only fighting their mortal enemy Cobra, but they are also forced to contend with threats from within the government that jeopardize their very existence as well. The film opens at the demilitarized zone in North Korea, where the U.S. military is engaged in an operation. Roadblock breaches the fences and infiltrate the North Korean territory. Mouse creates a diversion by shattering a North Korean soldier's teacup. Duke and Roadblock swiftly incapacitate the soldiers and approach a car concealing a North Korean defector. After securing the defector, they retreat to the South Korean side. Returning to the G.I. Joe base, they find everyone in high spirits. The scene then shifts to Tokyo, Japan, where Jinx undergoes a rigorous test administered by Blind Master in her quest to join the G.I. Joe team. Snake Eyes administers a rigorous test to Jinx, but unfortunately, she doesn't pass. Blind Master then presents Snake Eyes with a new sword and warns him of an impending threat. Meanwhile, Duke and Roadblock unwind by playing video games until they catch wind of breaking news reporting a civil war outbreak in Pakistan. In the president's war room, military officials deliberate on how to handle Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. The president resolves to intervene and retrieve the nukes, enlisting the help of the G.I. Joes. Duke briefs all the Joes on the mission to extract the loose nukes, swiftly mobilizing them towards their objective. Upon landing at the facility, the G.I. Joes proceed to their designated positions. Entering the facility, they swiftly engage the terrorists. Duke spots a terrorist attempting to move the nukes and, alongside Jay, eliminates the threat, securing the nuclear weapons. Loading the nukes into a vehicle, they transport them to the nearest U.S. military base and Duke promptly informs the president of the successful recovery. However, unbeknownst to them, Zartan, disguised as the president, sneaks into a hidden basement where he has imprisoned the real president. Zartan reveals his intention to annihilate the G.I. Joes and demands information from the real president regarding the whereabouts of Destro and the commander's prison. As helicopters approach the Joes' base, they unleash a barrage of rockets and bullets, launching a full-scale attack on the G.I. Joes. Duke rushes to aid Flint but is struck by a rocket. In a bid to escape the intense firefight, Roadblock, Jay, and Flint dive into a nearby well. Meanwhile, Zartan manipulates the American public, falsely claiming that Snake Eyes assassinated the Pakistani president and the G.I. Joes attempted to pilfer Pakistani nukes, so he dispatched his covert special forces unit, Cobra, to eliminate the Joes. Emerging from the well, Roadblock, Jay, and Flint witness the devastation wrought upon their base. Flint urges Roadblock to abandon the site, while Roadblock asserts his new role as the leader of the Joes. Ultimately, Roadblock resolves to depart from the base. The scene transitions to the Einsargen subterranean prison, where Snake Eyes is brought in as a prisoner. Warden James welcomes him to the prison and escorts him to a cell where Destro and Cobra Commander are held. Upon arrival, James instructs the Snake Eye to remove his mask, revealing none other than Storm Shadow. Roadblock cautions Flint against reaching out to anyone, harboring suspicions that the president sanctioned the strike on the Joe base. While traversing the desert, they spot a plane and stumble upon a small airfield. Meanwhile, Firefly approaches the prison, deploying robotic drones that goes near the prison which attract the attention of Storm Shadow. Reacting swiftly, Storm Shadow halts his heartbeat, instigating panic among the guards. As they attempt to inject him with serum, Storm Shadow retaliates, overpowering and eliminating the injector. Warden James intervenes, commanding the guards to open fire on Storm Shadow, but he swiftly dispatches them. Meanwhile, the drones released by Firefly detonate, eliminating the soldiers guarding the prison gate. Despite reinforcements, Storm Shadow proves formidable, neutralizing them with lethal efficiency. James uses a defibrillator to shock Storm Shadow, briefly incapacitating him and allowing James to escape. Seizing the opportunity, Firefly races to the prison's entry gate on his bike, crashing through it and shattering the barrier. Storm Shadow wastes no time, freeing Commander from his cell. James commands the guards to open fire on Storm Shadow and Commander as they exit the room. However, Firefly swiftly retaliates, hurling bombs at the guards, eliminating them. As Commander and Storm Shadow emerge, they rendezvous with Firefly. Unexpectedly, James regains consciousness, wielding a gun and targeting a cylinder filled with flammable gas, triggering an explosion and causing severe burns to Storm Shadow. Commander orders Firefly to take Storm Shadow to the mountains for medical help. Unbeknownst to them, Snake Eyes observes their departure from the prison, monitoring their movements and discovering Jinx's presence as well. She expresses her desire to join Snake Eyes' team, which he accepts. Meanwhile, Commander arrives at the Zeus Industrial Complex accompanied by Firefly. While inspecting the progress of his weapon, he is interrupted by the sudden arrival of the president, who informs Commander that 3 Joes have survived the attack and are now on the run. The Joes return to the United States, where Roadblock seeks the assistance of a friend who provides them with a safe haven. They take refuge in an old gymnasium, where Roadblock tasks Jay with accessing the database to uncover the reason behind the president's order to attack the G.I. Joes. Storm Shadow recuperates in a mountain monastery under the care of a healer, who tends to him with herbal remedies. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes and Jinx are en route to Storm Shadow's location when they receive an urgent distress call from Jay requesting assistance. Jinx informs Jay that they are already tracking Storm Shadow. Jay relays to Roadblock her observations that the president's speech patterns and hand gestures have altered, deducing that the president is an imposter. Amidst growing distrust, Flint suggests they can trust no one, but Roadblock remains resolute, stating there is one individual they can turn to. Roadblock leads the team to General Joe Colton, presenting him with the badges of fallen comrades, and briefs him about the imposter president. Colton provides them with the location and schedule of the Chief of Defense Staff. Jay volunteers for a covert operation, donning revealing attire to seduce the Chief of Defense Staff. Taking advantage of the situation, Jay convinces him to assist her, requesting him to escort her across the street. During this, they seize the opportunity to abduct him, coercing him into arranging a meeting with the president. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes and Jinx journey through the mountains in pursuit of Storm Shadow, eventually reaching the monastery nestled in the peaks. Fully recovered, Storm Shadow prepares to depart when he witnesses his guards tumbling down the mountainside. Attempting to flee, he finds himself facing Snake Eyes in a narrow alley, triggering a fierce battle between the two warriors. Meanwhile, Jinx infiltrates the monastery and engages in combat with the healer, eventually incapacitating her with a powerful kick to the face. During the scuffle, Snake Eyes restrains Storm Shadow while Jinx places a mask over his face, rendering him unconscious. They then hastily pack Storm Shadow into a bag and leap from the mountain, evading pursuit from the monastery guards. Utilizing ropes, they swing from one ledge to another, fending off the pursuing guards as they make their daring escape. A fierce battle erupts between Snake Eyes, Jinx, and the guards, with reinforcements closing in from a tunnel. To counter the threat, Snake Eyes detonates a bomb, triggering an avalanche that wipes out the approaching guards, allowing them to escape the deadly cascade. Meanwhile, Jay infiltrates a White House party using a fake ID. However, suspicion arises, prompting a guard to search for her in the database. Jay manages to rendezvous with the president, engaging in a brief conversation before discreetly extracting a sample of his hair. She quickly transmits the sample to Roadblock, who analyzes the DNA and makes a discovery that the president is Zartan. Roadblock instructs Jay and Flint to evacuate while he prepares to eliminate Zartan. However, their plan is interrupted when Firefly deploys his drones, halting Roadblock's advance. A fierce confrontation ensues between Roadblock and Firefly, with Firefly gaining the upper hand and incapacitating Roadblock. Just as Firefly is about to deliver the fatal blow, Flint intervenes, ramming Firefly with a car. After getting injured, Firefly flees the scene on his bike. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes transports Storm Shadow to Blind Master's location, where Blind Master subjects him to interrogation regarding Cobra Commander's intentions, threatening him with the very sword used to slay Hard Master. Storm Shadow denies responsibility for Hard Master's death and attempts to strike Snake Eyes with the sword, only for it to shatter upon impact. Storm Shadow asserts that a Rashikage steel never breaks, prompting Blind Master to question him about Hard Master's killer. Storm Shadow deduces that it was Zartan in disguise who murdered Hard Master. Meanwhile, Cobra Commander arrives at the location where the real president is held captive, obtaining his retinal scan to activate the nuclear arsenal. Roadblock was planning to take down Zartan when Snake Eyes and Jinx arrive with Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow warns them that the upcoming nuclear summit is a trap. They decide to seek refuge at Colton's hideout, where he equips them with weapons to combat Cobra Commander and his forces. Later, they make a plan to infiltrate Fort Sumter and stop Cobra Commander. As tensions escalate, leaders from around the world convene at Fort Sumter. The meeting commences, with the Russian leader proposing a 50% reduction in nuclear arsenals over the next 3 years. However, the US president introduces the bold concept of complete nuclear disarmament, threatening war against any nation failing to comply. As the leaders prepare to depart, a guard presents a nuclear briefcase to the president, who abruptly declares war on all other countries. Meanwhile, Flint infiltrates the castle while the rest of the team readies for battle. The US president enters his access key and initiates the launch sequence, unleashing a barrage of nuclear missiles. As G.I. Joe initiates their assault on Cobra, leaders worldwide activate their own nuclear briefcases, launching retaliatory strikes against America. Jay, accompanied by Colton, swiftly neutralizes a Cobra soldier guarding the entrance to the White House. The US president initiates the self-destruction of his own nuclear arsenal. In compulsion, leaders from across the globe follow suit, eliminating their own nuclear weapons. The president then broadcasts a live stream from every capital city, unveiling his new weapon, Project Zeus, boasting 7 satellites armed with missiles capable of devastating entire cities. Cobra Commander barges into the meeting and activates the launch button. A missile is unleashed from one of the satellites, hitting the London city and obliterating it in its entirety. Cobra Commander orders his operatives to hoist the Cobra flag over the White House, demanding unwavering loyalty from the other world leaders. Suddenly, Storm Shadow launches an attack on the Cobra guards, while Snake Eyes enters the fray, neutralizing more guards. Zartan seizes control of the device, prompting Cobra Commander to order Firefly to retrieve it from him. Roadblock storms into the battlefield with a small tank, obliterating a Cobra tank. As Zartan attempts to flee the meeting room, Storm Shadow intercepts him, but before taking action, Snake Eyes entrusts him with the sword. Meanwhile, Roadblock deals with the remaining Cobra tank, ensuring the battlefield is secure. Storm Shadow confronts Zartan, but his attempt is thwarted by Firefly, who seizes control of the device and makes his escape. In a separate mission, Colton and Jay launch an assault on the basement where the real president is being held captive. They eliminate the guards and liberate the president, escorting him to safety. Storm Shadow avenges by fatally stabbing Zartan with a sword. Cobra Commander makes his escape from the fortress via helicopter, evading attempts by Snake Eyes and Flint to thwart him. Meanwhile, Firefly attempts to flee on a motorcycle, but Roadblock catches up, disabling the bike. Firefly seizes the control box and escapes aboard a boat, while determined to stop him, Roadblock pursues in another vessel. Roadblock manages to disable Firefly's boat, initiating a dramatic showdown as the satellite prepares to unleash its destructive force. Roadblock strikes Firefly, rendering him unconscious, then accesses the control box and initiates the self-destruct sequence for the satellite. Firefly wakes up and tries to attack Roadblock with drones, but Roadblock seizes control of remote and neutralizes him. Storm Shadow passes the sword to Jinx, who attempts to return it to Snake Eyes, but he declines and insists that Jinx keep it. Colton commends everyone for their valor and presents them with medals of honor. Additionally, he bestows a firearm upon Roadblock in recognition of his exceptional courage and leadership.